All right, I'm glad you're here today on a Monday. Hope you had a really terrific Mother's Day. I did, and I hope you did as well. My next guest, Mark Mix, is the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, provided legal aid to workers in dozens of cases involving the UAW, including at the Nissan North America plant at Somerset, New Jersey, and NTN Bauer, that's Hamilton, Alabama. They're fighting what they call the Roach Motel of the UAW. Mark Mix, welcome back to the program.
Steve, good to be with you. Sorry I couldn't connect. You don't want to see my face anyway, but I'm on the road and I've got technical issues. But you guys are professionals, and so here we are. We're connected again.
Good to have you here, Mark, as always.
Yeah,
the Roach Motel. The Roach Motel of the UAW is what these Alabama workers call. Now, tell me about this, because this comes at a time when people at Volkswagen, for example, have voted to unionize with the UAW here recently. We see this happening. What's the real story?
Yeah, well, the Roach Motel, the framing of that, it's easy to get in. It's really hard to get out. And that's one of the issues that are facing workers now at Volkswagen and then obviously at Mercedes-Benz. This week, there's a big vote at Mercedes-Benz plant in Alabama whether or not the UAW is going to represent workers there. This is their first try at this particular facility. But it calls into question kind of the power of the UAW when it comes to forcing workers into unions and how they do that. And we had this case in Alabama where we were helping UAW represented folks down there as it related to ball bearing plant that was had the union in place since 1976, and they tried to get out. They had to get 5 different votes to get out. They won the first 2. The union filed charges, and the NLRB overruled or ruled in favor of the union. They rerun the election. The third time they had the election, Steve, they had 148 votes when there were only 140 eligible workers. So the NLRB had to throw that one out. The union actually won that one, but the ballot boxes were actually stuffed. And then elections 4 and 5, the workers won again until the 5th election, when finally the UAW stood down and the workers were able to get out of the union. It's really hard to do that. And we've got a dramatic increase in the number of decertification elections across the country. And it comes into play here because, the union officials, particularly the UAWs out there pushing this, these historic contracts they won with the so-called Big Three automakers last year and how that impacted workers. And the fact is there are more people kind of getting fired and getting laid off from their jobs now at Stellantis and Ford because of this contract. And, not many people are talking about that.
Yeah, that's an important fact you made there, Mark, that people don't realize. And it's exactly, by the way, what Donald Trump had said while visiting Michigan last fall in September, and then several times more recently. He said, look, you can get this great contract. That's all fine and well. What difference does it make if there's no job? And he was spot on, wasn't he?
Yeah, indeed. In fact, the Department of Energy and the literally hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money being used to support and subsidize the electric vehicle, manufacturing and the battery manufacturing for electric vehicles. All of that comes conditionally with the idea that you got to have, you got to let the union into your workplace in order to get any of this federal money. So the government's got their thumb on the scale now, and they, the EV being produced at Chattanooga is this ID4, that Volkswagen product that's full EV. Mercedes-Benz is building an EV plant down there, or a battery plant down there, and adding a production line for EVs. In order to get this money, you've got to agree to basically keeping your mouth shut about the impact of unionization on these workers. And I'm sure those workers in Michigan and the UAW members of the so-called Big Three, they were very sensitive to the EVs, and Trump was spot on about that. I mean, apparently the drive and the demand for EVs is diminishing, but yet the UAW keeps pushing, and the federal government keeps pushing our automotive manufacturing facilities into this electric vehicle mandate that I think is still in place, Steve. I don't know. I mean, we got to have, 70% EV vehicles manufactured here by 2032 or something like that.
But it's never going to work. I mean, here's the problem.
Right.
If you force this to happen, as Ford demonstrated, I just talked about with Pete Hoekstra just before you came on, $132,000 lost on every vehicle, just over that, in fact. $1.7 billion in losses for Ford. That's just the first quarter of 2024. You can't continue to produce vehicles that you lose $132,000 every time you push one out the door. And Ford Motor Company, I just read over the weekend, canceling more battery purchases because there's no future there. There's no future there at all, right?
Yeah, that's right. And unfortunately, Sean Fain, I mean, he was quoted, I think, talking about, we got to, this mandate, we got to go forward. But, if you look at the production line of an automobile manufacturing plant that's running EVs, I mean, I think Bill Ford says it, or the president of Ford Manufacturing now said, look around, for every 10 workers you're looking at, 4 of them are going to be unemployed if we make this conversion to electric vehicles. And so if you're an EV, if you're working at an automotive manufacturing plant, you're a UAW member, and you wonder what your leadership is doing by pushing this and supporting it and encouraging the president to continue that path, then you've got to wonder if you're getting the representation you're paying for.
Well, exactly right. And look, people, and I want you to tell folks where they can find you, because even folks that are in unions today, they have rights they might not even be aware of. And that's a big takeaway here. They have rights that they might not even be aware of, where they don't have to support political causes, where they don't have to be forced and coerced by unions to do things they don't want to do, right?
That's exactly right, Steve. I mean, not only in the private sector, but in the public sector as well. But in the private sector specifically, you can still be forced to pay dues or fees in a non-right-to-work state like Michigan and the 23 others across the country. You can lose your job if you don't pay fees, but you can't be forced to pay for politics. And sometimes that's hard to sort out. But they can find it, and they can talk to a lawyer at the foundation at www.nrtw.org, and we provide free legal aid to workers all across the country. In fact, we have about 260 active cases right now on behalf of workers where we're helping them exercise the rights they do have, Steve. To your point, they're minimal in a state where unions have this power to compel you to pay them dues or fees in order to work, but they can be executed. It just takes time and patience, and it takes courage to stand up. I know that.
Yeah.
And I have hats off to folks that do have the courage to stand up and fight back.
NRTW.org, National Right to Work. NRTW.org. If you have questions about your union and where your dues are going, and you want to ask some questions, that's where you go. Mark Mix, greatly appreciate you being here as always.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
There you have it. Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. NRTW.org. If you have questions about your union and what's possible, I'll be right back.